Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. Okay, things are coming together. There was some stuff that I just couldn't do on camera because it's just too tight, you know, hands in here. It wouldn't have done well for camera, but I can explain to you what I did. So for example, once I soldered the connections from the motor, the wires are, you know, attached to the motor along with the sensor cable, and so I soldered those onto the electronic speed control, mounted the electronic speed control with two-sided tape, but I've also put two zip ties through the roll caging and around the speed control to help hold it in place, because if this thing's going to get bounced around, that two-sided tape is not going to hold up for long with this much weight. So I highly recommend doing something like this to make sure that you have really anchored your speed control. There doesn't really seem to be any other place to put it. If you put it up in the front, you're, you know, stealing from your battery. You can't put it all the way up front because your steering servo is going to be in the way. Also, the wires probably wouldn't reach, and that's just kind of ridiculous anyway. So here it is, receivers in place. I'm probably going to be switching to a different radio later, but for right now, I'm going with my good old Airtronics and the waterproof receivers that I have for it. And so I've got just the wire just kind of loomed in here through this little slot. And so I'll be able to anchor the cover down on top of this. Not much else has gone on. I am going to need to trim out this this little servo over here so it operates the dig correctly. I went ahead and finished off the helmets for the drivers, and I'm going to be two-sided taping the ESC power and reset switch right here, so I can get to it when I need to, because that actually seems to be a frequent thing with hobby wings. Anytime you make changes to the ESC as far as programming changes, things like that go, you have to reset or recalibrate the throttle brake on your transmitter to the ESC again. So it's a process of hitting the reset button, getting this into the correct mode, and then hitting the reset button several times as you go through centered, full throttle, full brake, and then it knows what to do and it's all set. But it is kind of a pain to have to do that anytime that you do a software upgrade or make changes to the electronic speed control's parameters. The real reason that's kind of a pain is because the transmitter, you have to have zeroed out everything that has to do with the throttle and brake. So if you've got ABS turned on, you've got to turn it off. You have to undo any trims that you have, as far as sub trim and regular trim. You have to zero out any exponential or any endpoint adjustments that you've made to the throttle. You don't have to change your steering, but everything has to be zeroed out on the transmitter as far as throttle, and you have to reset everything back again. So, you know, it's not a huge deal, but it is a little bit of a pain, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this button out where it's easy to get to, where you can reach both the power and the reset button at the same time, because you need to be able to use them at the same time when you're trying to get it into that reset mode. Anyway, that's specific to Hobbywing, and you know, there may be other manufacturers that have something like that going on. I don't know, but in any event, so I'm not going to bolt this down and put the top back onto the roll cage until I have reset that servo, and that's going to be my next step here. So I don't have to have the speed control hooked up for that. I can, or I can just plug a battery pack into the receiver because I'm just working with a specific servo. I'm not changing anything else. So that's going to be the tough part because batteries are being put in storage mode as usual. At the end of every race weekend, I take all the batteries and put them in storage, even if I'm going to run them again the next week. It's just good practice, and it's something that you should definitely be doing. So I'll probably record this. I may not show a lot of that process with the transmitter because it's going to be specific to my transmitter, but it may be a good exercise to kind of just show you how, at least in my transmitter, it's done, and you're going to be doing a similar process to make this work for your dig, because what you're going to have to do is set it for two specific positions. That when the third channel is in, let's just say, position 1 and position 2, on or off, left or right, however it's, whatever the nomenclature is on your transmitter. Basically, we're going to have two positions where the dig is off and you're locked into all-wheel drive. It can't be in between. You got to have it firmly in there, but not pressing hard against it because it'll wear out the little transmission fork. And then it's got to be in the dig position. And again, it's got to be firmly in the dig position. That one, because it's non-rotating, you could probably just, have it could be firm against there because the fork is holding the wheel, and the wheel is locked into a set position. It's not rotating on the fork. Still, not a good idea to have the servo straining against that. So you really should try to follow the directions exactly as far as the positions that these need to be, and they give us specific measurements. Let me just pull that out right now and refresh. Okay, it is on E3, page 23, and 2.56, I assume that's millimeters. It would be nice if they specified. It's pretty much got to be, but they really should have put that there. And it's also kind of odd that they're measuring to the end of the black eyelet, because depending on how far you screw that in or not, that is going to be a variable. They really should have measured to the top of the center point on the servo bolt or something. I don't know. That wouldn't do it either because that's the same situation. I guess there's just no way around it. But if I could get close enough for you to be able to see, yeah, that's tough. You might be able to see that there's a couple threads visible on my push rod because the push rod had run into the end and was starting to bulge out the little O-shaped yoke, and so I had to back that out and shave with an X-Acto knife that little bit of plastic that had been kind of bulged. So in my case, I was not able to fully bottom out the plastic eyelet onto the end of that rod. They show it here at bottom, and as I recall in other places, let me see. Nope, I guess not. Just this image here. So I'm going to kind of have to guesstimate a little on these numbers and do a little by feel, make sure things are locked and feel like they're solidly in position. I'll just have to work that out, I guess, or I can measure to the end of the threads. But anyway, I'm going to get the transmitter, and I'm going to go ahead and just plug in the ESC because I've got a battery pack handy for that. Okay, so just to show you how this works, here's our dig servo. Here is our linkage going into the transmission, and right now it is in all-wheel drive, okay? And if I flip the switch on my, oops, yeah, we can actually see that because everything is rotating. So front and rear axles are spinning. Now, if I flip the switch, you're going to see that servo moving, and now I can free the rear, and now the rear locks. Okay, so there's that space in between, in the middle of the throw, where it's neither in dig nor in four-wheel drive, and you can tell you're in that mode because you can free spin the axle. And you kind of want to be turning it a little bit to make sure that the keys lock together, because remember, you're dealing with 4 pins and 4 pins that have to come together like this. And if they come together like this, they're going to stop. They're just going to hit. So you want to kind of be rotating this as you're doing your setup and testing so that you know that the keys drop in and you'll see it happen. So I'll turn this again as I go back the other way. See, now I can free spin the axle, and then there it is locking into front wheel drive, and we know that we're in front wheel drive or all wheel drive because I can run all of them. If I flip it back to the other position, and again I'll just kind of give them a little bit of a turn. So if you're in a complete stop, you may not be able to get fully into dig until you start to move a little bit. So now if I press the throttle, only the front wheels turn, the rear wheels stay locked in place. So our dig is doing what we want it to. And I made those adjustments by adjusting the endpoint adjusters. I didn't use trim at all. In fact, this radio does not have trim for the 3rd channel. It just gives you the endpoint adjustments, which is all you really need because you're not trying to have any extra positions. You're trying to have a yes or a no. And so, you know, it's either in or it's out. It's one or the other. So adjusting the endpoints, you know, stop here or stop here, and it just goes all the way from one to the other. So that's how you're going to do it. You're going to look for, in mine, it's abbreviated by EPA, endpoint adjustment is the acronym. So that's what you're going to want to tinker with and get that set up. It was fairly easy to adjust it so the servo isn't like whining, you know, stuck up against something. Just get it so it locks all the way, and then, you know, back it off a few clicks, you know, while watching how much motion you're actually getting so that the servo isn't whining at the same time you're not pulling it out of the dig, because you don't want those teeth like halfway. You want them to be, you know, almost 100% locked in position, and then a little bit of play in the fork. So there you go. Simpler than it would seem, as many things are in this hobby. A lot of things seem like it's a big mountain to climb. It's going to be hard to figure out. And then once you actually dive in and start tinkering with things, you're like, that wasn't so tough. So, you know, never be afraid to try. That's the main thing. So now, before I button things up, I want to make sure I've got any electronics done that I want to do. And I picked this up here. It's a simple LED controller with LED lights, 4 white and 2 red. I wanted to put a couple of little red spotlights out the back here, and at least do the 2 headlamps, and I'll probably do a pair of bucket lights. So that way I'm using all 4 of the front LEDs. And I think I'm going to go ahead and set this up now and get that all knocked out, get everything plugged in before I, you know, drop the driver's compartment back in and button up the receiver compartment, because that's a lot of work to undo, and I don't want to have to do it any more than I need to. So, and of course I'll still have the light bar up top. I'm surprised they didn't put a lens on this. They just left it, you know, the bare LED circuit board. You know, I think it's nice they threw in the light bar, but I think it's at the same time a little weak that they didn't give us a simple clear lens to make it look a little better, a little more realistic. It wouldn't have. I don't see that as a big expense as long as you're throwing this thing in anyway. But whatever. I'm sure it'll be fine, and when it's lit, you're not going to notice, and it's always going to be lit if you're running it, so no big deal. So I'm going to open this little package up. I'm going to start going through things, and I will show you the light process as I go. Okay, I'm working on the tail lights. The front lights don't leave a lot of room to maneuver. I'll show that in a moment. This is a little bracket that I made, and I'm using this type of glue. It's for styrene and ABS plastic. It's a solvent cement. Basically, it fuses them pieces together. This is the type of material. It's basically just sheet plastic. You can cut it with a knife, you can sand it, you can shape it in all kinds of ways. You can even cut it with a sturdy, sharp pair of scissors, at least when it's in thin form. So basically, I just built this little bracket here, and I'm going to be drilling a few holes here, and I'm going to be drilling a couple of holes in between these little stiffeners, and I'll be bolting this directly to the box. And so the tail lights will be back here about like that. So, you know, discreet, out of the way. They're red lenses. There were clear lenses, but I painted them with a clear red paint. Let me show that to you in case you're trying to source it. Okay, I'm not sure where that bottle is at the moment. In any event, it's this type of paint. It's these little Tamiyas, and it's transparent red is the color. Now, the lights that I'm going to be using are red themselves, so you could conceivably use them with a clear lens. I just thought it would look nicer to have the red lens. That way, it just I don't know. I just think it'll look a little better. So, let me go ahead and show you what's going on up front, or rather, what's not going on. Okay. I've looked at different ways to mount something up front here, and I played with a couple of different bracket ideas that would mount onto this bar right here, which has a flattened surface. Unfortunately, I had to make this cutaway because when the suspension comes down, it would run into the servo horn. And the next problem is that when if you bottom out the suspension, the steering linkage is going to actually bang into the lights unless they're small lights. And I wanted to use these nice large round lights, and just really didn't seem to be doable anywhere around here. I thought about skipping the grill and just filling this aperture with lights. But to do that, again, you know, fitment problems. They are too big for this aperture here. the way they're wired, it doesn't really give me the ability to mount them back here at the moment unless I redo the wiring. So what I'm going to do, for starters at least, is I'm going to trim these two lights out of the loop and join these two negative leads together, thus completing the circuit. And so that'll eliminate these two bulbs altogether. They'll just be the two headlamps up in the front here. And I'll have the two tail lights, and I'll have the light bar. That should be good for now. At some point, I may, build a couple more, use this same material and the same basic scenario to build a couple of lights that would stick out on the side. The only problem is they're going to be ripe to be broken, knocked off, if the truck rolls or it goes between something that's going to catch on them. So I'll cross that Rubicon later. For now, I'm just going to go with pair of headlights, the light bar, pair of tail lights, keep it simple. So I will show you more about this as it goes along. This is actually a pretty solid way to build little things, because you're not just gluing the plastic, you're actually fusing it together. It literally chemically melts the plastic. As you can see, I've put a little along the edge here just to kind of smooth it out and make it look a little nicer than if it's just been cut or sanded. You can see the difference. So it just makes for a nicer appearance. But like I said, it's very solid. So this shouldn't be something that breaks. And considering the location that I'm mounting it, it's not in a position where it can catch on anything or where it's going to be, there's just no way, the thing can roll over, etc. The lights are inside the roll cage, so they are safe and sound. So that's it on the lights for the moment. I will, as I said, I'll show you this as it continues to evolve. I decided not to cut the two extra light bulbs off right now because that would be permanent. So I wrapped them in a couple of rotations of black electrical tape, and I have used some black twist ties. Twist ties come in real handy. They're a little less bulky than zip ties. So what I do is I make a twist with them, and then I trim off as much of the wrap as I can and still have it hold together, and then just tuck it in. So this is going to just wire right in like this, and then this little lump of bulbs and stuff will just get tied right up here like this, out of the way. And this will run in here to the controller, and that way if I do decide to do some extra lights out front, I've already got two bulbs ready. Hopefully they won't have a overheating issue, but if they do, I'll just cut them out and put in some new ones. So not that big a deal. So small dilemma, no big deal, just a matter of different way of doing something. I have the light bar, which has a standard servo plug, and it just plugs into an empty receiver port, assuming you have one. The same goes with this. This is the power block. I guess it probably either steps down the voltage or steps it up to make it appropriate for these LEDs. In any event, I would need to splice this into this wire or vice versa, because I only have one available port left on the receiver, and that's the battery port. Now, in case you're curious, the battery port flows voltage in both directions. So if you you can't use it for a servo, but you can use that battery port to power some other auxiliary item. It's going to be the same voltage you would get from any of the other ports. And that's actually works in our benefit because all of the ports that have signal are being used. The steering, the throttle, and the auxiliary. The auxiliary is being used for the dig. So instead of splicing these wires together and having to solder and all that, and since I may be making changes to this down the road anyway, also I may be changing out that receiver to a larger receiver. I've got a new 5 or 6 channel car radio coming. Anyway, so I'm just going to use a Y splitter. I conveniently have a pack of these that I bought a while back. So I'll plug that in, run this out of the box, and then I will plug both this light and this power block into these two adapters. Now that is going to do two things right off the bat. Aside from turning one port into two, I'm not going to have to worry about splicing this down line from here, because I don't know what's coming out of these two lines. This line here, which you can't see at the moment, is the line that actually comes from the power source, and then this goes to the rear lights, and this white and black one goes to the front lights. Exactly what this little block does, I don't know. It looks like it's got a couple capacitors in there. It doesn't do anything fancy that I can tell as far as switching and whatnot. I hooked it up with the radio and tried to accelerate and brake, and all the lights stayed the same. Like I wasn't sure if there was a brake light feature wired in or something like that, but there isn't. So in any event, I don't want to take the voltage that's coming out to these bulbs and put that voltage in here. It might be too high and it might burn this out, or it might not be enough. I don't know, because like I said, I don't know what goes on in here. I may try to look this up and see if I can find out. But in any event, it's just going to leave me a little extra wire to bundle, but I'm not going to have to worry about having to do any soldering at this moment. Okay, I've got the light controller two-sided taped under the faux dashboard, and it's plugged into one of the Y connector outlets. The light bar is plugged into the other one, and it's got enough slack to run the wire up the roll bar. The switch is two-sided taped down here. The antenna comes out and runs along this lower bar of the roll cage right here. So that way it's out and somewhat extended. You're never far away from your crawler, so having the antenna out or up in the air really is not necessary. It probably could just be coiled up in here, but I figured it would be better to have it out, and I didn't want to just have it loose, flopping around in here. So looks like everything's pretty much tied down and good to go. So I can now put this down in here, screw it in place, tuck the wires in, screw down the box cover, and everything is good to go. So it's going to be time to test drive this very shortly. All the body panels can go back on. You don't have to do this, but I just like doing this when I disassemble this kind of stuff. The body screws are very small and they're easy to lose, so when I take the panels off, I just screw them back in just a little bit, like 3 or 4 turns, so they're not getting away. It's easier than having them just be loose in a tray somewhere while you're working. So here are the tail lights. And I seem to have a little problem with the fronts, and I'm going to work that out next. But light bar's good to go. Tail lights look great. I'm really glad that I painted the lenses. I think it makes a big difference. So if I turn on the receiver, we've got taillights, light bar, and headlights. Everything's working. It's just a loose plug. So I'm going to be taking this out tomorrow for some field testing. Weather should be on my side. Looks good. So we're going to get first chance to take this out and get it a little dirty. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.